thank everyone for your patience. We did have a delay tonight. The reason for the delay was because we had a resolution that was prepared at the last meeting, and then tonight at 7:35, I was given a modified resolution, and we were asked by members of the board to vote on this. You have not had the opportunity to see this. So we're discussing on whether we want to move this tonight without all of you having the opportunity to look at it. Right.
Just read it.
Or read it out loud, see if the board can come to some agreement, and maybe we can all put our heads together and figure it out. It's either wait 2 weeks and move it after everybody's seen it, or hash it out tonight. I'd rather get it done. I mean, that's how I feel. So that's what the quandary is, essentially. I just got a 4-page document that was somewhat new to me, and we had to read it and then decide if it was a good idea, and if we could do it tonight or if we want to wait. So that's what the holdup is. We'll start out tonight with Pledge of Allegiance, and then the next thing on the agenda is the Youth Awards. Councilman Bruno, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first order of business is privilege of the floor. So I'd like to call up Mary Olson for our Youth Awards. How are you guys? The big crowd. Come on out front. I'd like to introduce 2 young people from Saugerties, Ryan Curran and Addie Tompkins. They were both nominated for our Community Youth Awards. So I'll start with Addie. Addie is 12 years old, and she was nominated by Roland Carrito. Addie was nominated for this award for her volunteerism and leadership at the Boys and Girls Club. She could always be described as an enthusiastic and committed young woman, but this recognition is based on her willingness to co-create a full-day arts program for elementary members during a recent no school day. These elementary members were completely engrossed in the activity and with great pride showed off finished pieces of work to peers and staff members alike. Addie was focused on their enjoyment and education throughout the project. This willingness to help the club and its members is common practice for Addie. So you really stepped up, so thank you. Congratulations. And that's from the village and town board, so wonderful job. So Ryan, you're up next. Come on, stand by me. It's a special privilege to give Ryan this award. I've known Ryan since he was, before he was born, since he was in his mom's tummy. His mom and I were having babies together. So he's a dear friend, and I'm really delighted that you're getting this one tonight. Ryan turned 8 years old November 25th and was having a birthday party with friends and family. Instead of receiving gifts, he asked for donations to the SPCA of Ulster County in Kingston. Ryan is a boy who thinks of others, especially animals in need. Ryan, that's awesome. You're a cool kid. Congratulations. I really like what you did. That's a really selfless, special thing, to make a special donation like that and give out birthday gifts too. You're awesome. So I'd like, come on up and maybe do a picture with the board. Does the board come up? We'll do a photo for the newspaper with everybody together.
There you go. Turn it. You got it? Okay.
Thank you both. Congratulations. It's really wonderful to see young people stepping up and helping each other and doing things that are selfless. we make our community better. So thank you. Our next order of business is the public comment period. We have a scheduled time typically for 30 minutes, and I have 1, 2, 3, 18 people, whoops, and more. 25 signed up to speak. We'll probably exceed our 30 minutes, but please do keep it to 2 or 3 minutes because we want to have the opportunity for everyone to have the opportunity to speak. I would also ask that we have a full house tonight, and we have people with very strong feelings on an issue that's a very big issue. It's a very important issue that we all have strong feelings about. So please truly be respectful of each other. That's the best way to really hear each other and listen. The reason we're here considering this resolution tonight is so that we can put our heads together and come up with a document that represents the thoughts of our community. This is your communication to Albany that we're crafting. So please let us know how you feel. We're going to take notes, and then we'll go from there. The first person signed up to speak is Nancy Campbell.
It takes a little while for the
Time's up.
Are they on?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, good evening, members of the board. I remember very well sitting there. I have sent you this letter, so I will shorten it for the, to the courtesy of the crowd, but I just wanted to reiterate how important this issue is. I support New York's SAFE Act. Adam Lanza used his mother's legally purchased Bushmaster assault rifle to murder her and continued on to the Sandy Hook Elementary School to shoot 152 bullets, killing 20 children and 6 adults in under 5 minutes. He reloaded only 4 times, using 30-round ammunition clips. Had his magazines held 7 rounds each, he would have had to reload 22 times. To say that the SAFE Act makes no one safer flies in the face of logic. Is it guaranteed to work? Are any laws guaranteed to work? Do we then throw up our hands, do nothing, and hope that a madman doesn't enter our own child's school with a gun? It is well and good that Supervisor Myers has pointed out a flaw in the law with regards to law enforcement's ability to continue to use their current weapons for public safety, and that our town is taking steps to promote more safety in schools. The glaring omission in her recent statements is that she makes no mention of banning the lethal weapons used in attacks all over this country, which is a very necessary part of any plan to keep us safer. Can it be, Supervisor Myers, that you truly see no correlation with the ease of obtaining these deadly weapons and the murderous rampages we witness all too frequently? These guns are not meant for the serious hunter or sportsman. They are weapons made for killing or incapacitating the greatest number of people in the shortest amount of time. They are designed for the battlefield, not for the backyard. While the SAFE Act bans the sale of new assault weapons, it does not take them away from those who own them. It requires them to be registered. The law restricts ammunition feeders to 7 rounds, yet does not restrict the amount of bullets which can be purchased. The law restricts access to or removes weapons from those deemed mentally unstable or a danger to themselves or others. It suspends or revokes a firearms license of a person against whom an order of protection has been issued. It demands surrender of weapons from those convicted of certain crimes. It toughens penalties for illegal arms sales. It increases the amount of court-ordered outpatient care from 6 months to 1 year for those who've been diagnosed with mental health problems. It requires background checks for all gun purchases, something which has the support of the vast majority of Americans. Common sense should tell us that yes, this law can help make us safer. None of us are naive enough to expect that the SAFE Act is the silver bullet which will pierce the heart of the violence which besets America. But it's a good start. Can the law be amended? Of course, laws can always be amended, but those killed or maimed by assault weapons cannot be amended. Isn't it time for America to evolve? Could the framers of our Constitution have foreseen that their young nation, in less than 250 years, would see more deaths by gun violence than any civilized nation on earth? Our nation was born of a violent and necessary revolution. Must we continue to live or die in violence? I am happy that New York has taken a bold stand to address the American plague of gun violence. I ask you, members of the Town Board of Saugerties, not to reject that stand. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Orlando Greco. Okay. Next person signed up to speak is Bruce Fraley.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor, fellow assemblymen or councilmen. I'm going to address this SAFE Act from a veteran's point of view. The New York State SAFE Act is an insult to all military veterans fighting for the United States of America. We follow our orders of officers and do our duty to the best of our abilities. Recent New York State federal and New York State laws have made it very difficult and hard for one to keep doing so. With the recent enactment of emotional and ignorant laws that blatantly violate the U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the New York State Constitution, our allegiance and loyalty to the country we love will dwindle in faith. I, as others, fought for this country's freedom, guaranteed by the above-mentioned documents. Many have given their lives, limbs, and became mentally affected. I can't stand to see our freedoms being eroded by progressive politicians with an agenda to disarm all honest tax-paying Americans, while criminals get all their legal rights for trials with attorneys and legal safety nets. The SAFE Act will do nothing to prevent mental deranged people from using whatever implement they can to inflict bodily harm, carnage to individuals and or groups of innocent people. Blunt instruments cause many more fatal injuries than any 100 million legal firearms. Put the Sandy Hook massacre blame where it belongs. Our mental health system, video games, and Hollywood have a lot of skin in the game and the blame for this tragedy. Therefore, from a military perspective, let's support our U.S. Constitution, Bill of Rights, the New York State Constitution, as they were written. Make us proud to fight for the land of the free and the home of the brave. Repeal the New York State SAFE Act 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Fraley. The next person signed up to speak is Gilbert Hales.
We got a big crowd tonight. Okay, as you say, I'm Gilbert Hales, live at 16 Red Maple. A lot has been said in the newspapers, on the radio, and at public meetings about the new gun law, SAFE. I am 83 years old and have never owned a gun or found it necessary to own one. But I've enjoyed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness guaranteed to us by the Constitution. I support the right of healthy, ethical people to own guns for hunting, target shooting, and if they feel the need, for self-defense. In 1999, our grandson, Ian Hales, was a student, 11th grade student, at Columbine High School, Littleton, Colorado. He was in the lunchroom when two fellow students conducted a terrorist act, killing a number of students, one teacher, and injuring many others. Fortunately, Ian got out safe without injury. 14 years later, this country is still trying to reduce or eliminate this kind of gun-related events. Having majored in U.S. history at college and graduate school, I feel I know and understand our Constitution. The authors of the Second Amendment could not envision the kind of weapons we have available today. When the Second Amendment was passed, Americans were in need of self-defense against other nations. England invaded us in the War of 1812, attacked our capital, Washington, D.C. We also had a Civil War where we needed a lot of self-defense, fighting each other. I support the right of our citizens to own guns, but we need to develop laws that prevent the mentally unstable and other types from obtaining weapons. I believe the members of the town board, 4 members of this town board here, have been doing a very good job for Saugerties for the years they have been on the board. I hope you will revise this resolution. There are too many confusing whereases in it. And I understand, I heard earlier that you have revised it. If it is passed, please do not send it to the President of the United States, the Vice President, our senators and representatives. I believe this is overreacting, overreaching. If there are mistakes in the SAFE Act, work to get it revised. There was a need to act swiftly following the Newton tragedy in Connecticut. That's why it was pushed through so fast. We needed to move fast. The legislators were not forced to vote for this, because 30% voted against it. 70% voted for it. They weren't forced to vote for it. They felt like everyone else, we've got to do something right away. We can't wait a while. Okay, that's all I have to say. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. The next person signed up to speak is Gregory Colleen.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of the resolution against the SAFE Act. I'd like to run through a brief history of gun control in the United States. In 1911, New York State passed the Sullivan Act. It was named for Big Tim Sullivan, a state senator and Tammany Hall politician who controlled the gangs of New York City. Even though this law was supposedly passed to keep guns out of the hands of the gang members, according to a January 2012 article in the New York Post, it seems the gangs were complaining to Big Jim that sometimes their victims were shooting back at them. So the Sullivan Act was really, the main purpose was to keep the guns out of the hands of the common citizens to protect the Big Jim's gangs. Jumping ahead to 1934, in response to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the National Firearms Act was passed. This banned the automatic rifles known as the Tommy guns. 1968, in response to the shooting of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the Gun Control Act was passed. This law created the licensing of firearm dealers and put restrictions on interstate sales of firearms. 1987, James Brady and Ronald Reagan were shot. The Brady bill was conceived, but Reagan, though he was one of the victims, did not support it. 1993, under Bill Clinton, the Brady bill passes. It requires background checks for all firearms sold through dealers, and according to the Chicago Tribune article from August 2000, Research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that the Brady Law had no measurable effect on gun homicide and suicide rates. 1994, again under Clinton, the federal assault weapon ban was passed. This law expired in 2004 and to date has not been renewed. According to the Department of Justice study, the assault weapon ban failed to show any significant effect on crime reduction in the 10 years it was in effect. So here we are today, 102 years after the Sullivan Act, still trying to fix violent acts of a few insane people with more gun control. Why is it that every time there's a crime committed with a gun, lawmakers punish people who did not do it? The law-abiding gun owner. Thank you for your
Thank you, Mr. Klein. The next person signed up to speak is Santos Lopez.
Sorry, I didn't make enough copies for everybody in the room. All right. Now, the first slide I'm passing out is, I want to read something. To truly conquer a nation, first, disarm its citizens. You know who said that? Adolf Hitler. And I don't want history repeating itself. Now, one of the reasons why gun control laws will not work, okay, if you look at the second page, I just want to know, like, for example, some people use marijuana in this area. It's been illegal since 1937, but the second photo from a New York Times article is a picture of Barack Obama. Says that he admits that he inhaled, and then the second one is Clinton. So how long has marijuana been illegal? So is gun control even going to work? So that
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
His opinion.
Let him speak. If, for example,
Folks, please, there's a lot of us here tonight. It's important you direct any comments to the board, and whether you agree or disagree with the speaker, it's important that we remain civil. So that's going to hold true for all speakers tonight. So please address your comments to the board, and remember that we are under a little bit of a time constraint. Thank you.
and it's the truth on the marijuana issue, it's been illegal. So how difficult is it for people to get? Obviously, not very, very difficult at all. Now, the next slide here, that they'll be passing around here, is, as you know, I'm a veteran myself, and many of my friends have died and been injured. U.S. service members died and were injured supporting the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. From the American Civil War, World War II, World War I, Vietnam War, Korean War, and the War on Terror, 1,247,920 soldiers died supporting defending the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. The actual numbers between all wars that veterans died and were injured for is, with all wars combined, 2,722,991 soldiers and sailors died supporting defending the Constitution of the United States. 1,531,000 were injured supporting the Constitution of the United States. And as you know, one of our own people here, I'm passing it around, Captain Dolan was a Medal of Honor winner, and he fought off 2 battalions of VC in Vietnam. That's a battalion is anywhere from 300 to 1,000 people, and survived that. So that's what you're going up against. So is it really the gun issue or a control issue? It's control. And you can look it up and research it yourself and look at the actual reports. People say that the AR-15 was used in Columbine. It wasn't. It was actually in the trunk of the car. So he had multiple pistols, and you could probably look that up under law enforcement stuff as well. And the right to bear arms wasn't put in the Constitution for hunting and fishing. It was part of a system of checks and balances, including why we have an executive branch, why we have a Senate, why we have Congress. So the 3 branches would actually do a system of checks and balances. And the Second Amendment was put in there as a system of checks and balances against the tyrannical government. With that said, I think you let live and let people make the choices. The law-abiding citizens are not going to do this. The criminals are always going to find what they need to get. And that's it.
The next person signed up to speak is Patty Kelly.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to the SAFE Act resolution that has been proposed to the town board by Supervisor Myers. Now, I have no doubt, Supervisor Myers, that you were approached by people in the community and people called you and asked you to oppose the state SAFE Act, that they want it repealed, and that they have asked you to pass a resolution that echoes the one passed by the Ulster County Legislature. That's not surprising to me. It's obvious tonight that there are people who feel that way. But surely we also, all of us must know that in New York State and across the country, there is an organized and concerted effort by organizations to fight any and all legislation pertaining to real or perceived restrictions on guns. What is difficult to understand is why you agreed to do it, particularly since, as you noted in the press, the town has absolutely no authority to change anything in the law, and certainly no authority to rule on its constitutionality. You could have, for instance, submitted a letter to state officials like the one you wrote in today's Freeman. It expresses your personal views on the SAFE Act, but it doesn't presume to speak for me or anybody else in Saugerties. Or you could have easily resolved one of the most important concerns and legitimate concerns that were raised about the SAFE Act by simply making a phone call, as I did and as others did, specifically to address the concerns about whether or not the law affects our police department's current weapons and its carrying capacity in the future. I called Assemblyman Lentil, who was the sponsor of the legislation in the Assembly and who was the chairman of the Codes Committee. His staff immediately said that they had already prepared a technical amendment to the bill to provide clarity that carrying capacity of police and other enforcement agencies are not impacted by the law. The governor has already agreed publicly to some of the technical changes, such as the one I just mentioned. What's worse is that your resolution not only contains some of the standard inflammatory language that found in NRA press releases, but it also makes some serious factual mistakes. For instance, you assert in the resolution that the law provides no money to our schools to respond to and prevent school violence. That is absolutely not true. There is an entire section of the law that addresses school safety and funds it. And because the safety of our kids as it relates to gun violence is so important to this community, no parent, no school administrator, or taxpayer should be misled on this point. I understand that reasonable people might have differing views about the SAFE Act, and I would hope that people would contact our representatives in the state and express those views. But the resolution, as written and as submitted to you to the board for a vote tonight, puts all the people of Saugerties on record as opposing the law, with or without our consent, and that's not okay.
The next person signed up to speak is Bob Lipman.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm not here for the SAFE Act because I really don't care about the SAFE Act because it doesn't pertain to me because I'm not complying. What I'm here to do is really thank all of the people.
But please,
I really want...
just as a member, address your comments towards the
Oh,
board.
yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm really here to do is thank all the people who oppose my point of view and thank them. I want to thank the people who voted for President Obama because without him, we wouldn't have the largest amount of guns ever sold in the history of the world. I want to also thank those people who voted for Governor Cuomo and his midnight tactics. Thanks to him, that's why we're all here tonight, okay? We'll also want to thank those people who voted for people like Feinstein, McCarthy, and they all happen to be Democrats. They're all opposed to what I like and what I enjoy. What I'm here to point out to the people here, the Democrats especially, and I'm a registered Democrat, but I want to point out to some of the registered Democrats who are affronted by everything that goes on revolving around guns, is that behind me is a new growing voting bloc. These people came about because of the SAFE Act. Now that they're here, they're a real force to be reckoned with. And you as politicians who seem to love your jobs, regardless of your party affiliation, better take notice that this is the result of what's going on with the SAFE Act. These people work, they have jobs, they have families, and they care, and the only thing that really is upsetting to you people is that we all own guns. Well, that's too bad.
Thank you, Mr. Lippman. The next person signed up to speak is Susan Weeks.
Hi. Thank you all for having this hearing. It's nice to be able to at least express our opinions. I hate the fact that there seems to be this understanding that people who support some kind of gun control hate guns. I mean, that's just crazy. Because a lot of us don't. A lot of us really, I mean, I ate a lot of deer and bear meat when I was growing up, and thank God my neighbor hunted it and gave it to us. And I support your right to have a gun. I support your right to hunt. I support all that, and a lot of us do. So I don't understand. I think what you've been sold is a bill of goods by the NRA. The rhetoric is that they want to take your guns away. I don't know where that came from. I don't know who believes that. Because we don't want to take your guns away. They don't want to take your guns away. Who's they who wants to take your guns away? The Constitution says a well-regulated militia. The Second Amendment is a well-regulated
excuse me.
militia.
Please, let's be courteous of every speaker, regardless of their views, whether you agree or disagree. And also, when you are speaking, direct your comments to the board, please. Thank you.
Okay. So in any case, a well-regulated militia means to me that it's regulated. That means laws. We have freedom in this country. We have what we call freedom in this country because we're a democracy of law. So to regulate guns, to me, makes, they already are regulated. How painful is that to people to have to register? I just don't understand why there's such a conflict or why there seems to be such prejudice. Just to close, 21,254 gun deaths so far this year, 194 today in this country. Guns kept in the home, 43 times more likely to kill a family member, a friend, or acquaintance. We're not talking about you, me, and thee. The unintentional firearm injury rate among children ages 14 and under in the United States is 9 times higher than in 25 other industrialized countries combined. We've got a problem here. And so, under the Constitution, we are trying to regulate this problem. And law-abiding citizens really ought not to have a problem with it. I don't have a problem that there are red lights and the cops are going to bust me if I go through it. I'm going to be chagrined. I don't have a problem driving on the right-hand side of the road. I don't have a problem following most of the laws that I'm required to follow because it's for the good of all of us. So I think that, particularly when the kids were killed in Newtown, that our sphere of inclusion, who our children are, enlarged. And just the fact that in this country, the unintentional firearm injury death among children ages 14 and under is 9 times higher than in 25 other industrial countries combined. It's because we have so many guns out there that are not owned by law-abiding citizens, that are unregulated. And even if we're not going to be able to stop all the killings, at least the law enforcement people will have better tools in order to prosecute and find those people who shouldn't be having them. That's why.
Yay! The next person signed up to speak is Finley Schaaf.
Good evening and thank you. I'm a retired Methodist minister, and I worked for 25 years in Brooklyn, and was close to the deaths of several teenagers on different occasions who were killed with guns, of course, and it left a mark on me that I will never lose, a mark of tragedy and sadness. Now, the thing that troubles me tonight is that the people who own guns seem to think the SAFE Act wants to disarm them and penalizes them for owning guns. It doesn't. And the thing that troubles me about this resolution, it doesn't specify what's in the law. What doesn't specify what is in this SAFE Act, that it doesn't like, wants to repeal the law without telling us what's wrong with it. Now, here's what's in the law. I'll summarize it. First of all, mental health professionals, if they're afraid of a patient becoming violent, will have to report that person so that his or her name can be checked on a gun database to see if they own guns. If they do, the authorities can take it away from this violent, prone, mentally ill person. That seems to be very reasonable to me. We all agree that it's crazy people that have done these mass killings. And some of them could have been on the gun database. Secondly, assault weapons are banned. Now, the assault weapon is carefully defined in this law. I don't know if you think that's a terrible thing. To me, it seems to me that the weapons that are legal and you're allowed to have are sufficient for hunting and self-defense. Thirdly, dealers in ammunition have to register with the state police and report their sales. It was said that that killer in Aurora, Colorado went into a theater in Aurora. He had 6,000 rounds of ammunition that nobody knew about, that he got online. The SAFE Act will make that illegal. Also, background checks. If you can't just sell a gun privately, it has to go through a licensed federal official to sell a gun or to transfer it, so that there can be a criminal background check. And finally, if a judge issues an order of protection and finds that the individual subjected to this order may use a gun, the judge has the authority to have that gun taken away. Now, that's the heart of this bill. Excuse me, but we should be thankful to the legislature for trying to protect us.
Chief, please direct your Mr. Schaaf, direct your comments
We
towards
should
the
be
board.
thankful, and we'll make it illegal for somebody, this crazy person, to walk in and kill our children in their classrooms. We grew up safely. We all went to classrooms and attended classes. We didn't have the violent society maybe that we have now, but our children deserve that protection. And we should keep the call for the repeal of this law makes no sense whatsoever.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak is Beth Murphy.
I'll keep my comments brief because I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said. To me, it's unfortunate that this motion, the town supervisor has introduced the SAFE Act motion when the town board basically has no say in the law. I think the town citizens would have been better served if our town government focused on the issues over which it can rule rather than on those that it can't. If this motion is not going to be tabled and it is going to be proceed as is, then I would vote against the current motion. There are sections of the law, as people have said, that make sense, that are good, that even at the last town board meeting, the increasing the background checks, universal background checks, the chief of police and the person who is the head of the Sportsman's Club agreed that we need more background checks. There's also a part of the law that hasn't been mentioned that calls for the safe storage of rifles, shotguns, and firearms, which I believe almost everybody here would agree with. In their home, you need to have it stored safely so that children or robbers can't get access to it. One of the things that was brought up at the Pete Lopez meeting, though, was it would be nice if there were a tax break or a tax incentive for people to purchase these safes for the storage of firearms. And right now, I don't think that exists. So I think that what Mr. Schaaf said is absolutely right. To overturn the entire law without specifying what you find distasteful in the law is not fair to the law, because there are portions of it that do make sense, that I think do make us safer. And I think we need to keep those parts. We're looking at how the law can be amended to address the parts that people find objectionable. I think the chances in the state level of the law being overturned are slim, because it did pass by 70 days to 40 or 30 days. So I think the best chance is to try and get it amended. And the last thing I'd like to say to basically everybody in the room is that how are we going to explain to our children or our grandchildren that we voted to repeal or overturn this law if, God forbid, something like Sandy Hook should happen in Saugerties? How are you going to explain that to your kids? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Bruce Tuckman.
I'd like to thank the town board and the supervisor for allowing us to speak here tonight. There's been a few misconceptions. A lot of the people have been talking about some of the provisions that are federal and not pertaining to New York State. New York State already has a 10-round magazine limit, et cetera. So that, you know, a lot of that is not pertaining. I just want to read some comments. As you know, the New York SAFE Act is currently the law. By passing the resolution to oppose the SAFE Act, you are merely making a statement to the governor. You are not writing law. Even now, due to the unrelenting outcry by us, the citizens of this state, there may be some tweaks to the law as the legislature and governor attempt to finalize the budget. Many towns and almost all of the 62 counties in New York State have already refuted this bill as just plain wrong. It was created wrongly and passed wrongly. The New York SAFE Act was rammed through in the 11th hour with a false message of necessity without any time for either the elected officials to read the bill nor any public comment. The normal process is to let any bill season for 3 days to provide this time for review and comment. There was no message of necessity, as many of the provisions in this bill take effect over time anyway. There is very little in the law that will actually do anything to save lives. And people have made reference to gun deaths. The majority of gun deaths in this country are in inner cities, and the inner cities already ban guns. So banning guns does not help people stay alive. People who are anti-gun will praise it merely because they are anti-gun. Many provisions of the law may be found to be unconstitutional in the courts, and lawsuits have already been filed. Most guns do not make a 7-round magazine, and this is one area which may be changed due to the people's pressure. New York already has a 10-round magazine limit, and all handgun sales and transfers are well regulated by the county sheriff and the New York State Police. The state will never do away with all guns, and to single out specific guns is just plain asinine. The governor arrogantly acted for his own political strategy and never imagined the fervor it created to everyday people, people who actually care about personal rights and the Constitution. If New York City wants laws that affect them, fine. Upstate New York is a different environment. Please make a statement on the town level and join other towns and counties to vote and send a message to the elected officials to repeal the SAFE Act. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Andrea Perez.
I think Bruce probably said it much better than I will. However, the ramrod methods for passage of the SAFE Act without time for consideration and debate by all our elected officials in state government is abhorrent to me. No one politician should use their publicly appointed office for self-promotion and gain by pushing through legislation in a manner inconsistent with prescribed procedure. There was no imminent danger present in New York State at that moment. A 3-day period would have been perfectly fine for them to take instead of passing it in the middle of the night. I feel the SAFE Act was passed illegally and should be repealed in total. I appreciate your taking the time to listen to all your constituents and hope you continue considering the resolution to oppose the SAFE Act. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Mike Harkavy.
Thank you very much for time to speak. One thing I want to say before I just get to the SAFE Act is I don't think this is a political issue. I don't like the fact of Democrats. I am the chair of the Democratic Committee. I don't like the fact that Democrats are looked upon as a unified board that are all against or all for anything, any more than a Republican or a conservative is. We're all citizens of this town, and we're here on a very important issue, and to interject politics into it is wrong. When I first saw this resolution, what came to mind was the fact that it wasn't a bad idea to bring up the conversation in the town board. But the fact is, the SAFE Act will never be repealed. It was voted on by 70% in both the Assembly and in the Senate, bipartisan vote. All the leaders supported it. So when I looked at it, I said, why is the town board putting forth a resolution that doesn't have a chance of influencing the government? And I started to look at it in a different way, and I said, what would have made more sense, and maybe it'll come out in the resolution tonight, is that the town board should have been putting forth amendments to the law that were specific to the town, where legislators might actually look at them and read them. To get another boilerplate resolution that's been done over and over in different counties isn't going to attract any attention. I did have some really great conversations with the leader of the Saugerties Fish and Game Club, and we talked about this. And we talked about repeal or amendments. And I felt it was a really good dialogue. There's no separation just because people may not agree with this resolution. But the club decided that they want to go ahead with a full repeal, and I respect that, and we'll see what the town board wants to do. But in terms of amendments, there have been amendments already made. For instance, there was also an amendment to ensure that both active and retired police will keep all weapons and are not under the restriction of the law. That was one major concern I know of the gun club. Another major concern of the gun club was the reduction from a 10-round magazine to a 7-round magazine. And I really learned. I listened, I learned about this and the difficulties it would present to legal gun owners. Well, that is undergoing an amendment to, I believe, maintain it at the 10-round magazine level. So there are amendments going forward, and I would encourage the people in the audience that want to see change in this, rather than scream for repeal, send in amendments to our legislators. One other thing. From what I read, there was the first arrest by the police of a gun runner selling illegal guns. It wasn't a law-abiding hunter or target shooter. The law is working. All right, so a lot of the things that we've been talking about in terms of getting the guns out of the hands of criminals and those that would sell it is starting to happen. So I think we also, in passing, have to speak a little bit more about the children. The children that we want to protect. Let's talk about the Second Amendment and the rights of those to own guns. But in this conversation tonight, I've heard very little about the children. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Gary Bischoff.
Good evening. All right, first I want to say I'm a gun owner and I believe in our Second Amendment rights. However, I also believe there's limits in our Second Amendment rights and that this government has the right to make certain provisions and qualify certain people to have guns. So a lot of this resolution talks about the SAFE Act and how it was passed in the dead of night and how it's confusing to other people. We need 25 whereases to set this up. And then even in the resolves, it doesn't really ask for anything. It doesn't ask for a repeal of the SAFE Act. It just says, change those parts that infringe on our rights to bear arms. Who's making that judgment? Is that something you feel qualified on the town board that you can make? The other thing that's interesting about this resolution, it talks about the state assembly and state senators and says they're confused and that they rushed this through. And then we're asking them to do something. Really, a memorializing resolution is asking the state assembly and state senate to repeal the law. But first we're telling them you're confused. And we even have a resolve in here that says that the state assembly and the state senate doesn't have the right to pass laws like this. But we're asking them to repeal it. So that they don't have a right to make the laws, but they do have a right to repeal it. And they do have a right to make the laws. And it's been tested in the court many times, and there's been many laws over the years. People talked about some things that were good and bad about the SAFE Act. Yes, I would like to see that 10-shot clip thing change. I think it will be. I also spoke to Cecilia Katchik. There is an amendment that's in process that will come forward that exempts the police from having to follow the provisions of the SAFE Act. That's already being worked on, and she assures me it's going to pass. So that point is really null and void. I'm also a firefighter for many years, over 30 years, and many times I've been first, second, sometimes 8th, 10th, whatever, on the scene. This bill provides for additional penalties for anybody shooting at first responders, cops, firemen, ambulance, like happened up in Rochester. And you can imagine how terrifying that scene was. If you've been at any kind of fire, there's all kinds of popping noise and crackling noise in a burning building. You wouldn't know what's gunshots and what's not until you saw people laying down. I'm glad that they're taking that into account and taking that serious. That's a good part of the SAFE Act. The other thing I want to say is, if we're going to err in this at all, we need to err on the side of safety. If you don't know what to do, you always have to err on the side of safety. Thank you.
The next person signed up to speak is Gaetano Sherlanti.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to say that I'm hearing some rhetoric here tonight that sounds as if there wasn't already some gun control. But New York State already, before the SAFE Act, had one of the strictest gun laws in the country. And what I want to point out a couple of things. You know, the definition of assault weapon, that's very subjective. And that's a political term. I don't think that there's any gun dealer who can tell you what an assault weapon is, because an assault weapon would also have to include things like knives and anything that you can use to assault someone with. And I was in charge of the mental health services to the Ulster County Jail for 12 years. And actually, the only times that I can recall seeing a gun used to kill someone was a gangster, in a gangster situation. The other times where I interviewed people who had committed a murder had done them with other kinds of things that were not guns, such as their own hands, for example, knives, not shootings, knives, whatever, bats, whatever, hammers, seen everything. But, you know, it also seems like there's a tendency to see whether or not the law is working by how many arrests are going to occur. And, you know, that's just creating, which are, not you guys, but what the law is doing is it's creating criminals. Because these folks behind me today, they're not criminals, but many of them, you know, own weapons that are going to put them in that category. And what I heard, I also want to talk about something I haven't heard. I got a couple of emails on this today, and the chief just confirmed it for me this before the meeting. And that's that in terms of implementation of this law, the state is offering $500 reward now for tips on people who own guns in violation of this law. And I hope that the chief will maybe talk a little bit about that in his report. So yeah, you know, maybe we'd like to think that they're not going to implement it, but I think they've got every intention of implementing and basically dividing the citizens, dividing us amongst ourselves. You know, that kind of tactic was used in Nazi Germany. I hate to, you know, get all dramatic about it, but, you know, people would pay. Actually, George Soros, that's partly how he survived, was by turning in his own people. So I think this needs, you know, the people here are asking you tonight to represent us, and, you know, maybe not all of you agree with this, but there have been other times in which the town board has made decisions where not everybody agreed with. For example, the casinos. You know, that's part of the way our government works. So I believe that the very majority people here tonight would ask that you speak for us by passing this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Lenny Walter.
Good evening and thank you. The town board represents the entire town of Saugerties, over 23,000 people, and when it acts, it ought to do so in a thoughtful and deliberative manner. It should not pass a resolution that a string of whereas clauses without confidently knowing that what the clauses mean and whether they are truthful. Passing a resolution responds to political pressure rather than based upon their own good judgment does not do the Board of Towns proud. Please make no mistake that the resolution under consideration is a political act without any chance of undoing the legislature and governor what they have done with a large majority of both houses. If the town board is going to act on the proposed resolution, I ask you to take into consideration what Justice Scalia and the Supreme Court majority actually said about the right to keep and bear arms. The case was District of Columbia versus Heller. The court addressed the District of Columbia's decision to make it unlawful for a person to possess a functional handgun in their home, a decision that arose from out-of-control gun violence in the district. The Federal District Court approved the ban, and the Court of Appeals reversed, holding that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess firearms, and that a total ban on handguns and a requirement that the gun to be kept non-functional, even when necessary for self-defense, violated the Second Amendment. The District of Columbia appealed to the Supreme Court. For the record, please know that the New York's Attorney General at the time, Andrew M. Cuomo, filed an amicus brief requesting the affirmance of the Court of Appeals. At issue in Heller was whether the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to bear arms, or individual's right to bear arms, or only in the context of militia service. The court upheld the individual's right to bear arms, but in so doing, addressed what is meant by the term arms. Justice Scalia wrote for the court the term arms, when used in the Constitution, quote, applied then, meaning the 18th century, as now, this is 2008, to weapons that were not specifically designed for military use and were not employed in a military capacity. When men were called to serve in the militia, they were, quote, expected to appear bearing arms supplied by themselves and of the kind in common use at the time, end of quote. Quote, the Second Amendment does not protect those weapons not typically possessed by law-abiding citizens for local purposes. The court then went on to state, this is Justice Scalia writing, like most rights, a right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. From Blackstone through the 19th century cases, commentators and courts routinely explained that the right was not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. For example, the majority of the 19th century courts, to consider the question, held that prohibition on carrying concealed weapons were lawful under the Second Amendment or state analog. Nothing, in our opinion, should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. And in a footnote, they wrote, we identify these presumptively lawful regulatory measures only as examples. Our list does not purport to be exhaustive, end of quote. Finally, Justice Scalia wrote, we all recognize another important limitation on the right to keep and bear arms. In the Miller case in 1939, the court said that the sorts of weapons protected were those, quotations, in common use at the time. We think that limitation is fairly supported by the historical tradition of prohibiting the carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. The court concluded that military-type weapons are different from what was carried when the Second Amendment was adopted. The inalienable right to bear arms does not embrace military-style assault weapons. I believe, as a lawyer, the SAFE Act will be upheld by the courts as a reasonable regulation on the right to keep and bear arms. The issue is in the court now, and the first round so far sustained what the governor and legislature did to try to reduce the gun violence in our society. As has been repeatedly acknowledged, the problem of gun violence is much larger than that addressed by the SAFE Act. The act is a step in the right direction to flag unusually large ammunition buys, to keep track of the weapons in circulation, and to assist law enforcement. What flaws that may exist can or are being addressed through amendments. In fact, the act imposes an unfounded, if in fact the act imposes an unfounded mandate upon the town, that shortfall ought to be remedied, and a resolution asking for such an amendment is appropriate. Public hearings would allow the residents of the town and state to learn the true impact of this effort to regulate possession of military-style weapons that do populate this town and nation. Since gun owners will be allowed to continue to possess and use their arms, a resolution by the board that the SAVE Act severely limits their right with no basis in reality or in law. Thank you very much.
Next person signed to speak is Mike Meyer.
Thank you very much for the opportunity tonight, and I'll keep my statement tonight very brief. 2 weeks ago, there was a relatively major announcement about the town of Saugerties. Sorry. 2 weeks ago, there was a relatively major announcement about the town of Saugerties, and that announcement was a drop in the town's bond rating. At the town board meeting 2 weeks ago, I guess I expected discussion about the bond rating and the increasing costs that the town citizens would be bearing as a result of this. And instead, the focus of the meeting was about something which the town board really has no control over, and that's gun control. And that seems to be what's going on tonight as well. I guess I would suggest to the board that they table this resolution until such time as we've addressed the things that are really important to the town. It seems like we've sort of taken our eye off the ball and focused on things that are a little outside of our area. When taxes don't go up, you can focus on guns. When the schools are tops in the country, you can focus on guns. When we're bringing in more jobs than affordable housing, you can focus on guns. And when our bond rating is AAA, you can focus on guns. At that point, you can focus on other things that we don't have any control over, you know, Obamacare or abortion or peace in the Middle East or whatever. But at this time, I suggest tabling this. This is not our area. This is something for the people in Albany to deal with, or the people in Washington to deal with. We have our own issues, and until we address those issues, I think we should table this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Charles Lance.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Charles Lance. I live at 20 Owl's Nest Road, Saugerties. I found it kind of ironic to look at that resolution and to understand that it was introduced only within 3 hours of the previous board meeting, so to speak, under an emergency declaration, I suppose. And then it criticizes, of course, Governor Cuomo. Not that he doesn't deserve criticism. In any case, I'm a veteran, I'm a gun owner, and under the SAFE Act, I own an assault rifle. And so I'd like to speak to that issue. I always thought a bayonet lug on a rifle was good for hunting deer. You might save a cartridge and just bayonet the damn thing. In any case, this resolution doesn't speak to my beliefs. And my beliefs are that we need to protect ourselves and our children from gun violence. And it doesn't bother me that I have a rifle, which I understand under the regulations I'll have to register with the police and renew that registration every 5 years. If they want to have the rifle, they can have it. It was actually a free gift of the U.S. government by injection. So therefore, I ask you to reconsider this resolution and can or table it, might be the more appropriate term. If it needs to go forward, I think Mike Harkaby's suggestion that some kind of gathering of people with interest in this law and resolution, work together to draft a resolution which does have suggestions that might be effective in regard to discussing this issue with legislators. But as it stands, I'm resolutely against the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Judith Simon.
I too wonder why we are talking about this, since we have no power over this whatsoever, other than what Mr. Harkavy mentioned, that we could suggest amendments. Nonetheless, some statistics. More people have died by gun violence in this country than in all the wars that we have ever fought. 32,000 people per year die of gun violence, and that's not to mention the hundreds of thousands who are maimed and wounded and whose families suffer as a result and who suffer themselves as a result. Of those 32,000 gun deaths, 20,000 of them are suicides. That's a permanent solution, I put the word solution in quotes, for a temporary problem. Most of those are teenagers, etc. Many of them are not mentally ill. Many of the people who do murders are not mentally ill. Some of it is very up close and personal, like a husband killing his wife in the middle of a heated argument or gun brawls. In countries where they have tough gun legislation, they do not have things like that happening. The rate of homicide is absolutely correlated to gun legislation. There are limits to the Second Amendment, like there are limits to everything else. There are limits to the First Amendment, which is probably the most important amendment in our Constitution. If I shout fire right now, it would be illegal. I would be criminalized for that. Same thing with gun regulation. There are limits to it, and one of the limits are you can't have a howitzer, you can't have a nuclear weapon, for example. There are limits. When the Second Amendment was written in 1789, people were carrying muskets, and I want to stand and record that anyone who wants to carry a musket, I'm completely in favor of. There are other rights that we have to think about too. The more guns that you own, the more you impinge on my right to feel safe without one. I have to trust your judgment with your guns in order to not own a gun of my own. And the other thing is, which I think is really essential, is when you talk about the Second Amendment rights, what about the right of the people who have been killed and maimed by guns to live and to be safe, and for all of us to be safe? As I said, the more guns, the more killing. It's absolutely, statistically, a correlation. The SAFE Act protects us. It's an attempt to protect us. It's not 100% perfect. If you have ideas to change it or to make it better, I think that's a great idea. And if you think that we're going to repeal it as the town of Saugerties or even the county of Ulster, it ain't going to happen. So I think and I also hope that some of the people who have been talking and have actually read actually take the time to read the SAFE Act and see what pieces of it they actually object to. Because really there's very little in there, I think, that you would object to if you actually read it piece by piece. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Eric Stock.
My name is Eric Stock. I am one of the directors
of the Federated Sportsmen's Clubs of Ulster County, which is a 5,000 plus member organization. We also represent tens of thousands more unincorporated sportsmen throughout the county. The number of amendments that have been proposed in this short period of time is evidence of the little thought that was put into this law. One of the wonderful amendments that has been proposed thus far allows assault rifles and high-capacity magazines to be used to shoot movies in New York State. The mental health provisions that have been discussed here tonight are being accompanied by large cuts in mental health services, making the laws that have been put into the SAFE Act on the mental health provisions a paper tiger. The arrest on the gun sales that happened earlier this month, I believe I heard today that they've actually been thrown out of court. I continue to hear that the firearms that are banned under this law are military grade and fully automatic. They are not. They are actually one of the most common owned and sold firearms today, making them a gun of today. I'll make a little analogy here. I'm sure most people in this room drive a car. State government's going to pass a law tomorrow that is going to require that you have a 3-cylinder engine in your car. Your choices are to sell your car out of state, remove the engine, and put in a 3-cylinder, which no one makes right now, or just let it sit in your driveway. That's how this results in confiscation, by making a firearm that you already possessed unusable. I support a resolution to repeal the SAFE Act. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Mary Rell.
I really wasn't prepared to speak tonight, but yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, speaking of my.
But after hearing what people had to say, there was a couple of things that I really needed to say something about. People brought in statistics that talk about guns and what damage they've done. Where are the statistics for knives? What are we going to do? Take knives away from people? You're taking the guns away from the people that are, the innocent citizens that are here legally doing what's right. And he's going to take a picture. And the truth is, do you really think that's going to stop people from committing suicide? Do you think it's going to stop people from murdering other people? Well, then I think you're really naive, because the truth is, it's not
Okay,
gonna
guys,
stop.
we've been doing really, really well. Let's be mindful of the speakers and give them the courtesy that we all deserve. And please, speakers, direct your comments to the board, and that's it. Thank you.
Well, I am directing it to you, I'm just looking at everybody.
It would be helpful if you
Just
focus on us.
you?
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine.
I know it's not much to look at, but it would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, well, truthfully, I don't believe that it will stop murders. You look at the laws that are happening in Illinois, and they have the worst murder statistics that you could ever find, and they have the strictest gun rules. So, it really doesn't cut it. I also heard about the order of protection, apparently is on that, but they took guns away from people that had orders of protections against them. What did it do? So that new thing doesn't really mean anything. I can't remember the woman's name. If I knew I was coming here tonight, I would have brought the right information. But look at the woman that would have probably died when she was talking on the phone to her husband, and she had to kill the guy that was coming after her. We need to have protection. There's no doubt about it. There's no way the police department can be everywhere and do everything. It's impossible. And why shouldn't we have that protection? It's been our legal right all along. Why should that be taken away from us? Now, it's something different. If somebody has a mental health issue, you know, things like that, yeah, we agree with that. We have to look at that. But for regular citizens, it's just wrong. It's just wrong what's happening. And when you look at it, even right now, the police then are criminals because according to what is written up, they're not supposed to have what they have. Would you really want the police to go out there and try to protect us, not having everything possible at their fingertips? I don't think so. There was many more other, but I can't remember them all. And so that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's courtesy tonight. This is really important to be able to hear each other. The next person signed up to speak is Jeff Helmuth.
Thank you for giving us a chance to talk. I also wasn't real prepared, but we keep saying the word SAFE Act. That actually stands for Secure Ammunition and Firearms Enforcement Act. And we keep saying it's important, but it's not. It's serious. It's critical. This is a tipping point in the American Constitution. It flies in the face of the Constitution. It does infringe on our right to keep and bear arms. And that's an important part of this entire debate that we have to remember. As New York goes, I found, so goes the country. It's a trend-setting state. So this is a tipping point in all of America. And a lot of speakers said that if the various towns and counties submit these resolutions to the state capitol, that it will do no good and that it will have no impact. But it will. It will. The more towns, the more counties that submit these resolutions, even if they're wordy and not perfectly written, it will send a message to the elected officials that the majority of us citizens are against it.
Yes.
And somebody, another speaker talked about statistics. My niece, who has a master's in graduate college degree, moved to Jamaica to start her career. In Jamaica, all guns are illegal, including for hunting. There's no guns allowed in Jamaica ownership whatsoever. Jamaica has the highest murder rate in the Western Hemisphere. I think Cuomo, pushed this through quickly and without deliberation for his run at the presidency, and I think it's ultimately going to hurt him more than it helps him. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed to speak is Marjorie Leopold.
I'll keep my comments very brief. It seems to me that this highly controversial act is based on very strong opinions on both sides about the actual meaning of the Second Amendment. And based on my understanding of this, the Second Amendment, of course, talks about a well-regulated militia. Is necessary. And I think that the SAFE Act and other gun control acts around the country are really making attempts to define what well-regulated really means. It's a messy and difficult issue, obviously, to resolve. But if there are, as we know, so many deaths because of gun violence, whatever we're doing in this country right now to effectively regulate guns is just not working. So even if this SAFE Act has many flaws in it and has to be amended, it is an attempt in the spirit of those who wrote the Constitution to have a well-regulated militia or a well-regulated ownership of guns so that they're in the hands of people who will be safe and not in the hands of people who would use them for wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Donna Greco.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I would like to say that there's a lot of misconceptions about the Second Amendment and about guns and gun violence and that kind of thing. And I just want to give everybody a little idea of some of the actual facts involved with this. First of all, I want to say that I don't know how anybody can misinterpret the Second Amendment, and I don't understand how anybody can misinterpret shall not be infringed or even a well-regulated militia. I mean, I don't understand how that could be misinterpreted, but I'll go on. In 2011, these are death facts from assault weapons. In 2011, there were 323 deaths by so-called assault weapons. There was 496 deaths, which is more than the assault weapon deaths, used by hammers. Okay, drunk drivers caused 12,000 untimely deaths in 2011. And this one might surprise everybody, but 195,000 deaths, untimely deaths, were caused by medical malpractice. And nobody has said, wow, it's time that we outlaw doctors. When you go to the doctor, you're at risk. When you go to the hospital, you're at risk. 195,000 deaths per year. Actually, it's 200,000 per year is what the average is, but 195,000 deaths were in 2011 by medical malpractice. I don't hear anybody saying, stop going to the doctor. Other assault weapons are included are baseball bats. I haven't heard anybody say, let's outlaw baseballs or baseball bats. Okay? So you're actually 600 times more likely to die in the hands of a medical doctor than by an assault rifle. Okay? There's just so many misunderstandings and misconceptions, and they're all based on false premises. Adam Lanza didn't use an assault weapon. He used a handgun. I'm not saying that that's anything good, but nobody wants to see anybody die, especially not children. Everybody feels that the children should be saved. It's not like people that own guns want children to die. That's not true at all. But I believe in personal freedoms, and I believe in a limited government. And a government that comes in gun grabs is a government seeking power and control. Law-abiding citizens are being targeted by this new law, and the law-abiding citizens are not the ones who are responsible for any kind of deaths to children or any kind of crazy murders or suicides. And nothing in this law addresses the people who are getting these guns or who are crazy or misguided or, the breakdown of society is what's responsible for some of these people who have, taken guns or stolen guns or used guns in crimes. The SAFE Act, or whatever they want to call it, does nothing to address any of these things, and I just feel like if they take the guns out of the hands of the law-abiding citizens, when was the last time that you knew of criminals who followed laws? The whole idea of a criminal is the fact that they do not follow laws. They do not do what is being told to them or what is a part of the law. So making a SAFE Act and telling people that they're not allowed to have magazines of 7 rounds or more, isn't going to make the criminals follow the laws. I think that people here have stood up and said that 70% of the elected officials in Albany voted for the SAFE Act. Well, I just want to say that 70% of people are really a high risk for losing their jobs, because I think they're going to get voted out. I just have another thing to say about the police department, and I think the police department does everything they can to, help the citizens of this town and the country, but really, police are called after the fact, and really they show up to clean up the mess. They really don't have any way to defend a crazy person in a school, in a movie theater, in anywhere that somebody decides to start shooting up innocent people. By the time the police are called, it's way too late for anybody to do anything about it. So unfortunately, the police are there to clean up the mess and to count the dead bodies. They're not there to protect, well, they try to be there to protect, but by the time they're called, it just doesn't work that way. So unless they have a police officer or an armed citizen, law-abiding citizen in the school, ready for something to happen, they're never going to be able to prevent these acts of violence happening in schools. The Adam Lanzas of the world are just going to continue on their killing rampage, and especially if we disarm citizens who would be there to protect them if they were armed. Now, I'm a woman, and I really feel like a woman's right to choose also includes a woman's right to carry a firearm to protect herself. And if somebody had mentioned something about, oh, a husband can come and kill his wife, with a firearm. Well, if the wife has a gun too, that husband isn't going to be killing her.
That concludes the public comment period this evening. I appreciate everyone coming tonight and sharing your views. We have varied views, and it's good to hear all of them. I wish Albany had taken the time to hear your views before they passed this law. I really feel that way. And I think it's very good to write them down, to think about it, and consider them carefully. In that vein, I'd like to take a 10-minute recess before the board reconvenes. So, thank you. All right, good evening. Next section is supervisors' comments. I will be brief because I'd like to get going with our motions and meetings. I did have 2 resolutions, actually 3, that came before me after the agenda went out. One of them is a bond resolution for the US EPA bid projects for the furnishing of water meters, so that'll come up later. This is something that the board has already voted to do, but we have to go out and get the funding for it. That came in today from our engineers. And then the other one is a resolution of the Saugerties Town Board authorizing Town of Saugerties Supervisor and the Highway Superintendent, Town of Saugerties Chief of Police to enter into an agreement with the Saugerties Fish and Game Club for the town police's use of the range, which is a good, really nice exchange of services, I think. So that will also come up tonight. So I wanted to add those 2 things to the agenda as motions. Other things. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I thought it was a very good discourse of ideas. There are things in the SAFE Act I think that are good, and then there are things in the SAFE Act that I think are not good. And I can go into some of the specifics of it. I really, really like the provisions for the Webster Act. I think that's great. The first responders that were murdered when they responded to a call, I thought that was horrific. And to improve the penalties, for going after a first responder is really important. Making sure weapons are locked up is really important. When there is an order of protection, making sure that the parties involved don't have access to guns to hurt each other in the meantime is really important. There are some things about it that I didn't like as well. You know, we're not really sure about the mental health registry. You know, that sort of stigmatizes people and sends it to the federal government, some personal medical stuff, and I didn't like that at all. Transporting people in police cars who get picked up for psychiatric things, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to do things either. So there are definitely some things in there I don't really like, but we'll get into a discussion of it later in the meeting. But I would like to thank you all for coming and commenting on it. I also truly think it's wonderful that you respected each other and heard each other during the discussion. There are varying viewpoints, and I appreciate that. Just prior to the meeting tonight, I did receive an amended resolution, and it was about like 7:35. It was handed to me. I read it through somewhat. It has not been made available to the public because I just received it. I don't know when it was finished. It comes from other members of the board, so that will probably come up as well later on in discussions. I'm disappointed with the way this came out. We've had 2 weeks to come up with amended resolution, and I just got it tonight right before the meeting. So that's all I have to say. I'll move on to approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the minutes of the pre-board meeting of March 6, 2013. Make a motion to approve the town board meeting minutes of March 6, 2013. Okay, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Make a motion to approve our bills for the general fund, $29,490.29. General outside of village, $350.95. Highway, $4,233.79. Capital projects, $3,375. Ambulance District 0, Lighting District 0. Berkeley Heights Sewer, $4,053.61. Glasgow Sewer, $197.68. Malden Sewer, $8,984.39. Malden Water, $15. Kings Highway Water, $15. Trusted Agency 0. And the total is $87,715.71. Is there a second? Second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. All right. Next section is board and committee reports. We'll start with Councilman Layton.
I have no committee report.
Okay. Councilwoman Thornton?
Yes. Just like to remind everyone, if you were not here at the Town and Village Comprehensive Planning Public Hearing last week on the comprehensive plan for the town and village, you have an opportunity to view the program on TV 23. The schedules are online, also in the Post-Star and the Saugerties Times. And if you'd like to submit any other comments, we're accepting comments until March 30th. And you can simply leave them at Town Hall or forward them to the CPC site that's listed on the website. Something very exciting happening within the village, but also it's one of the golden crown jewels for our town, and that's the Kirstead House on April 27th. We're looking, I see a lot of men here tonight, I'm not saying the ladies you can't come also, but they're going to raise the 4 walls of the barn. There has been a very generous gift, an anonymous gift, that's going to make it possible for the 4 walls of the Kirstead House on the barn to go up. The project will be April 27th at 7 a.m. and we're asking you to bring a hammer and a tape measure. And there will be coffee and bagels and refreshments, but we're looking for this to be a community project. I don't know, those of you that have lived here for a number of years, remember the community spirit that raised the playground right out in the back here, that our kids have been playing on for the last 15 years or more. The barn is going to be such an asset for this community. They've already got many community organizations who are, we'd like to use it for this, we'd like to do that. So as soon as the walls are up, I thank you to whoever it is that made that donation, but we've got a lot of manpower, a lot of women power in this room, so mark your calendar, April 27th, from 7 a.m. until the walls are up. So I would invite everybody
take part in that. TV 23, we are basically looking at going, what could be mainstream? Streamlining. I'm not the tech person on the committee, but streamlining. And as you probably know, if you have kids in the high school, the studio at the high school is up and running and working very well. There will be classes now in the fall for any of you that would like to become producers. We provide free training, and you get to use the equipment and cover all the exciting events that are going on. And basically, that's all I have to report on. Live streaming. Yeah, live streaming. It'll be live streaming from...
And on demand.
And on demand. Oh my, okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Costello.
Chief, is there anything you'd like to report?
I think I'm just going to submit a report this evening, just in writing to the town board, just to expedite tonight's process.
Fair enough, and then I'll be quick as well. Something that I've had the pleasure of doing often, John and Kenny Benson made a significant contribution to the town again. They participated in the project and kind of spearheaded it. We replaced the foul poles on the main Dutchman field. They did this with Major League style poles. They donated all the materials and much of the labor that went into this. They're partnered with Randy Ricks of Rikers Electric. We donated his equipment and time as well to bore the holes and pour the concrete. So once again, it's just how Saugerties works together to make our community better. And that's the first of many, hopefully, exciting projects. There are going to be improvements to the main Dutchman field, a lighting project we're anticipating as well. So some exciting stuff going on there. March 29th is the last day of public ice skating, and March 30th is the Coaches vs. Cancer, where the coaches play their students that they've been coaching all season in an effort to raise money for cancer awareness. So my congratulations to them, and they're doing a good job there as well. And that's it.
Thank you. Councilman Bruno?
I have nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Move into motions and resolutions.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the resignation of John Becker from the Water and Sewer Department effective March 13, 2013.
Second.
Any discussion?
John's been an employee of the town for approximately 10 years, and he decided to move on to better opportunities. So I wish him luck.
I would like to ask that the position be posted, both on town bulletin boards and also in the newspaper, so that people would have the option to apply. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. I make the motion to accept the resignation of Roger Winchell from the Highway Department, effective March 30th, 2013. For a second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to wish Roger well. He's been a long time employee at the Highway Department. His experience and his strength of character has made him a leader up there for many, many years, and his presence will certainly be missed. Roger also has a great personality. He's always quick with a joke and something to cut the ice a little bit when things got tight. So his presence will be sorely missed up there, and we wish him well in his retirement.
We truly wish him well in his retirement. He's been a good long-term employee for the town. Great. Any further discussion?
In my experience as a board member, there's been many, many occasions where for health reasons or something like that, there was a deficiency in the operation of the department, and Roger was always the first one to step up and help out. Many nights, we all remember Bernie was ill. Roger kind of led the crew, and he didn't have to do that, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He stepped forward, and the residents never knew the difference. He took his job that seriously, and he did that good a job. So, you know, I'm happy for him, but we are certainly going to suffer a loss.
Again, we thank him for his service. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. I also would like to see this position posted as well on town bulletin boards and in the newspaper to give people the opportunity to apply.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the DWI Task Force Agreement as on file between the town of Saugerties and Ulster County. This document got a little bit of extra scrutiny this year. Chief was very aggressive in making sure that the town is not exposed to any additional liability. We had a meeting with the attorney who counsels with the county attorney, and we cleaned up some language that we think will be beneficial not only for Saugerties, but for other towns who participate in the program. And we have been incredibly successful. For a number of years, we've been awarded the most money, and this money is used for overtime costs associated with DWI task force. So it's a tremendous opportunity to help keep our streets safe for our loved ones, and we've been able to take advantage of that to the credit of our staff. They've all been very good participants in it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork required when they go out as part of one of these task forces, but they're out there and they're doing it. So congratulations to them, and congratulations to Chief to enhancing it this year.
Okay, any further discussion? Good program. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
I'd like to make a resolution. Whereas the town of Saugerties is a municipal corporation within Ulster County, state of New York, which is its principal office located at 4 High Street, Saugerties, New York. And whereas the Saugerties Fish and Game Club is a private corporation located in the town of Saugerties within the county of Ulster, state of New York, which is its principal office is located at 168 Fish Creek Road, Saugerties, New York. And whereas the town of Saugerties Police Department is a municipal corporation within the county of Ulster, state of New York, with its principal office located at 4 High Street, Saugerties, New York. And whereas the town of Saugerties Highway Department is a municipal corporation within the county of Ulster, state of New York, and with its principal office located at Churchland Road, Saugerties, New York. And whereas the town of Saugerties, the town of Saugerties Police Department, the town of Saugerties Highway Department are desirous of entering into a memorandum of understanding for the utilization of the town of Saugerties Fish and Game Club for the purpose of firearms training, safety, and liability protection. And whereas the parties are desirous of entering into such agreement for a term of 1 year, and whereas the parties agree that at the end of 1 year, said agreement would be renewed subject to the parties giving each other at least 30 days notice prior to the expiration of the current term, canceling said agreement. And whereas said automatic renewal will be for a maximum of 3 years unless otherwise agreed to by the parties within writing. And whereas the town board has the authority to enter into contracts and third parties pursuant to New York State Town Law, Section 64. And whereas the parties are desirous of entering into a memorandum of understanding, a copy of which is annexed hereto and made in part hereof as Exhibit A. And therefore be resolved by the Saugerties Town Board and the Town of Saugerties Supervisor Kelly Myers is hereby authorized to enter into and sign said memorandum of understanding agreement. And it is further resolved that the Town Highway Superintendent Doug Meyer is authorized to enter into and sign said memorandum of understanding and agreement. And it is further resolved that the Saugerties Police Department Chief Joseph Sinagra is authorized to enter into and sign said memorandum of understanding agreement. And then upon roll call.
Right, I'll second that.
Okay.
Right, discussion?
Discussion. The Saugerties Police Department for a number of years has used the Fish and Game Club as part of its annual firearm certification training. That training is required. It's required as part of our attempt to be accredited, but it's also required by DCJS. Is that correct, Chief? And we've been good about maintaining that. The Fish and Game Club, and actually you're here, you might as well speak to this. I'm going to question you anyway, go ahead.
Basically what we're just looking to do is just to solidify an agreement or a covenant with the Fish and Game Club for utilization of the range. And in exchange, what they're looking for is that we're going to make, over the course of time, some modifications to the range that's going to accommodate our training and our training curriculum. So that's, unless somebody has a specific question, that's really what we're looking for. I think from tonight's debate and how apropos this was this evening, that we had a discussion on firearms, it is the greatest liability that we carry as police officers. Therefore, the onus is upon myself as the police chief to see that all our men are properly trained. Now we're going to go from training once a year to 4 times a year in firearms. That doesn't mean we're going to actually shoot live ammunition 4 times a year. It means that we're going to be training with our firearms 4 times a year. One of those cycles is going to include the FAST machine, which is a firearms training simulator that is owned by the county, and we're going to be using that piece of equipment as one of our firearm cycles. Unless the board has specific questions.
I would only further add that we appreciate the highway superintendent's participation in this. Some of the stuff that he's going to help us with will improve the facility for our own purposes and benefit the Sportsman Club. But this is a valuable asset. In lieu of this type of agreement, we would be required to establish our own range. The new standard for range is cost prohibitive. It would require berming with clay. I believe it's clay.
Well, but we could not afford to.
We couldn't do it? Okay.
That's the bottom line.
So it would be cost prohibitive, and this opportunity will give us many years of usage that will allow us to maintain our police force.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. I have another motion. Or actually, it's a resolution. Do we need roll call vote on that? We do. We should do a roll call vote. Councilman Bruno? Councilman Costello?
Yes.
Councilwoman Thornton?
Yes.
Councilman Layton?
Yes.
Myself? Yes. Thank you. It's a nice exchange of services, and it's wonderful that we don't have to expend money to do this too. It's a nice trade. And we thank the Fishing Game Club. All right, next resolution. We have been working with the EPA grants. There was money left over from the water and sewer projects for Kings Highway, and so the board voted to move forward on a set of projects. So this is relating to the time frame for these projects. We have to get things engineered, paid for, and moving right along. So I'll just read this one out. Whereas the town board has received approval and authorization from US EPA to bid projects, TSA 131, which is the furnishing of water meters, and TSA 132, the installation of water meters for the Glasgow Water District. And whereas the town board has also authorized design and financing of the water district improvements, and whereas the plans and specifications for the project have been prepared by Bernier and Larios PC, professional engineers in Kingston, New York, and whereas all necessary state and federal environmental reviews have been performed, therefore be it resolved that contract TSA 131, furnishing of water meters for the Glasgow Water District, and contract TSA 132, installation of water meters for the Glasgow Water District, be advertised for bids in accordance with the general municipal law, and that the bid date of April 16th, 2013 be established. So that's the motion. Is there a second? Second? Any discussion? Okay, I'll call.
I feel silly. The monies that were left over from water and sewer were grant monies. We applied the maximum amount of grant money to the Kings Highway District that we were allowed to by law, and then those grant monies were left over. I don't want people who live there to think that their bonding could have been less had we employed these funds. We employed these funds to the maximum benefit on their behalf, and then there was monies left over, which is wonderful because it's it's a big project. It was in excess of $6 million, I believe, for the combined water and the sewer, and we were able to do it in a responsible fiscal way and have monies left over to make improvements that will not only benefit that district but the other districts throughout the town.
1.2 million was left, and those can only be applied to water and sewer projects. So we prioritized the projects and came up with a list of things that we needed to get done. So the federal government will be funding 55% of the projects, which is good. All right. So that's discussion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Sorry, I have to go do a roll vote again. I apologize. Councilman Bruno. Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Layton.
Yes.
Councilwoman Thornton.
Yes.
Myself. Yes. It passes unanimously. Thank you. The next order of business is the discussion regarding possible vote on resolution as on file opposing the SAFE Act. And that resolution was introduced at the last board meeting, opposing the process of enactment and certain provisions contained within the New York Safe Act. It has been available for the past 2 weeks on the town website, and so that is here for the board's consideration. I would move that the board consider this evening. Is there a second? The original one. I know there's an amended version.
Does it have to be read?
I did move it. Is there a second? The way this works is that put a motion on the table, there's a second, there's discussion. If there's an amendment, then the amendment is brought. And you'll second. Okay, so now we can open up discussion on it.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion. Is there a second? Somebody get the
Oh, you
second?
have to read it? I believe you have to read it, and then it's...
Okay. We've spoke, a little bit this afternoon about this amended resolution. Fred Costello and myself worked on this for over a week, and it was only done this afternoon, and I know the first person I went to was the chief to see what he thought about it. I'll read the resolution. Whereas the right of the people to keep and bear arms is guaranteed as an individual right under the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, and whereas the right of the people to keep and bear arms for the defense of life, liberty, and property is regarded as an inalienable right by the people of the town of Saugerties, and whereas the lawful ownership of firearms is and has been a valued tradition in Saugerties, and the rights protected by the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution are exercised by many of our residents. And whereas the people of the town of Saugerties derive economic and environmental benefits from all safe forms of recreation involving firearms, including but not limited to hunting, target shooting, and under the Constitution of the United States. And whereas there is a need to reduce gun-related carnage and to limit the ability of those who might engage in frenzied killing to possess military-style weapons built to inflict mass casualties, and where there is a need for tougher gun laws with respect to the right of law-abiding citizens to possess weapons for hunting, sport, and self-protection. And whereas members of the Saugerties Town Board, being elected to represent the people of the town of Saugerties, are duly sworn by their oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And whereas members of the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate, being elected by the people of New York State, are duly sworn by their oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And whereas the enactment of the New York Safe Act, Chapter 1 of the laws of 2013 has engendered significant controversy over both the process by which it was enacted and certain provisions contained within it. And whereas seeking and considering such public input is a standard to which we hold ourselves in the town of Saugerties and is essential to function in a democratic society. And whereas crafting the New York State Safe Act resulted in complex policy changes, many of which have been left up to interpretation and may be confusing even to the state legislators who voted on them, and the law enforcement officials who are required to enforce and explain them. And whereas those firearms magazines with a capacity larger than 7 rounds, which are authorized to be retained by existing owners, may only be loaded with 7 rounds and eventually must be permanently altered and to only accept 7 rounds, and whereas this legislation does not fully take into consideration the functions, procedures, and capacity of law enforcement to respond to emergencies, and whereas this legislation may represent a reduction in current carrying capacity of police officers' weapons and ammunition, and whereas this legislation may render obsolete firearms issued by the Saugerties Police Department to its officers with no recompense or financial compensation provided to the town to upgrade weapons. And whereas the failure to include funding in this legislation for replacement of compliant firearms in local police departments may cause a significant financial hardship on the town of Saugerties as an unfunded state mandate. And whereas the failure to include funding in this legislation for law enforcement personnel
time to collect guns recently declared illegal, store illegal guns, or arrange their final disposition may cause a significant financial hardship on the town of Saugerties as an unfunded state mandate. And whereas this legislation fails to provide funds and resources for specialized training of school personnel, local emergency first responders, and law enforcement personnel to respond to and prevent school violence events, such as the incidents that occurred in Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Saugerties does request the New York Safe Act, Chapter 1, the laws of 2013, be amended to address the foregoing issues of enforcement and financial hardship caused by any unfunded state mandates, provisions of the law, and that any provisions of the law which unlawfully infringe upon the right of people to keep and bear arms be repealed. And therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Saugerties strongly encourages members of the New York State Legislature to hold public hearings to address the issue of gun violence in a way that will produce meaningful results. And be it further resolved that the town board of the town of Saugerties strongly supports legislative action to protect all New Yorkers from gun violence while upholding the constitutional rights of gun owners. And further be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to New York State Senator Celia Katzig, New York State Assemblyman Peter Lopez, Jeff Klein, Dean Scalos, and Sheldon Silver.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have an amendment. Is there a second to the amendment?
I second the amendment.
All right, now we can open up discussion on the amendment. We can start with that. I'm very disappointed. We had 2 weeks to consider the original motion that was made. And then this, just came to me at about 7:35 tonight, and the public has not had the opportunity to review it. What's removed from this amendment is language that actually caused the problem in the first place. In the original resolution I made, it states where it is our understanding that the state legislatures have less than an hour to read the legislation, which contains approximately 25,000 words before being forced to vote on it. Whereas is our conclusion that there's no possible way any individual could have read the entire bill under the unreasonable time constraints set forth by the governor's mandate of immediate passage and understood its full implications prior to voting on it. And whereas our state legislators most certainly could not have had the time to request and receive the input of their constituents regarding this matter. This is important. Our government really needs to take that mandatory 3-day period to check in with its citizens and hear us, and they didn't do that. And to have an amended motion put forth just 20 minutes before our board meeting is inconsistent with the way we do things. And it's also, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm also not comfortable with not mentioning at all the process by which this was enacted. It's not like we're under wartime. This message of necessity didn't immediately prevent an immediate act of anything. It just took away people's ability to actually comment on this and look at the practical implications of it. And so I have a problem with that part of it. I think also if we're going to make a motion to amend, then we should really sit down and go through page by page exactly what we want to see amended. My original resolution had to do with repealing the SAFE Act, starting fresh, listening to people and finding out, putting our heads together to find out what's going to work in New York State. This makes a motion to amend certain aspects of it. We're going to make a motion to amend certain aspects of it. Well, that's fine, but then let's have a complete list. And I think that takes time to really come together with. There are things that I would certainly like to see amended. And there are also things about the SAFE Act that I actually do like. I like that weapons have to be locked up. I like the reference to the Webster Act, making it tougher penalties on people that harm first responders. I also like the Mark's Law provisions as well, you know, for harming bystanders. I think that's really, really important. I don't like that the SAFE Act requires a public registry for gun owners, that it makes everyone's names and addresses public if people have registered weapons. I don't think that should be public. I also don't like that it violates, currently we have mental health privacy laws that are federal, and they're really important, and I think it really impinges on people's right to privacy. If someone is hospitalized, they shouldn't be penalized for the rest of their life to be on some sort of an unsafe list. People are hospitalized in mental health facilities for many different reasons. I mean, it could be someone, you know, with postpartum depression or bulimia, or, I mean, I used to work in a psychiatric hospital. So many people are hospitalized, but not all of them are violent. And I don't think taking away their constitutional rights arbitrarily is a good thing to do. Police aspects of it locally are not funded. There's something about the police bringing people to the hospital on mental health calls. You know, I think that's it may be sometimes warranted if the person's violent, but not always. It also says that there are to be no weapons on any campuses, which is an interesting concept. If there's an active shooter on campus, our first responders need to be able to quickly neutralize that. They need to be able to respond. I have a friend who works at Ulster Community College, he's a security officer, and he's not allowed to bring a weapon. So if someone shows up with an arsenal, essentially, he really can't use anything other than his wits. So we need to look at having people have the capacity to actually deal with emergencies. So I have some problems with the amendment. And I'm sure other people have discussion items they would like to bring forward.
I'd just like to say that this law is changing on a daily basis, and even some of the things that we worked on this week have already been changed, mainly the police being exempt from that part of the law.
It has not been voted through yet.
Well, it's.
There's an amendment.
Mrs. Marzone,
let's,
we asked our residents to please be courteous to the speaker. No one interrupted your presentation. Let's give Mr. Layton his opportunity.
I'll take notes and I'll respond.
If it hasn't been voted on, it's going to be voted on, and I can't see where anybody logically could not exempt police departments or law enforcement agencies from this bill. As of this morning, the section of this bill regarding assault rifles was taken off the table, and I think they're going to stay with the original state law on assault rifles as it stands right now. When it comes down to it, the lawmakers in Albany are the ones that are going to have to amend this. I mean, we can't pass law. We can write a letter saying that we're against the law the way it stands right now. We also have to realize that the chances of it being repealed are slim to none, and we tried to make a resolution that spoke to the needs of the town, and in general terms, but it was taking some of the inflammatory language, out of the previous resolution. I mean, we can dissect it, we can add, we can just beat this thing to death. I think what we need to do is just get a resolution to Albany saying that we're not happy with the way the law is written now, that we are in favor of gun owners' rights, and also on ways that they might improve the process by having public hearings. Myself, I've told people that they should contact Pete Lopez and Cecilia Katzik, because they're the ones that can do something. I mean, I like the way, I just like the language in this better than the previous resolution.
The problem, Bruce, is your amendment doesn't say what you just said doesn't say. Your amendment is totally different. You have a motion on
We-
the floor, you have a resolution on the floor, move the
Let's, yeah, let's, like I said, we asked you guys, and we try to respect when you guys are speakers. Let's, let the board have our conversation, and, we'll make the best decision that we think we can.
All right, Councilman Bruno, would you like to comment?
All right, it rings hollow to me when you make the argument that this came to you late. The reason we didn't vote on the last time is it probably wouldn't have gotten seconded because we got the last resolution very late. As a practice, this board, we vote on things all the time. Tonight we just added 2 resolutions to the agenda and they were passed unanimously. I mean, if we're gonna hold this to a different standard than that, I have to ask why. Your original resolution does not repeal the entirety of the SAFE Act. It reflected 2 sections of the SAFE Act. This largely does address that. There's many references to the constitutionality of people's rights, and the courts have a job to do that, and we want this to get that scrutiny that it does deserve. No one wants to see a mentally ill person discriminated against. No one wants to see someone unlawful lose their right to their firearm. But we also are trying to manage people who can't possibly defend themselves, children, older people who need to have safety when they go to school or go to the movies or go in any public space or their own home. So it's certainly a complex issue. It's very hard to come to a conclusion that will satisfy everyone. I think there's enough language in here. We point to the dissatisfaction of the way the state passed the law. We asked them to continue on with public hearings so that people could come to a forum like this so that they can express their concerns and possibly have them addressed. This largely addresses many of those things.
I just have a couple of things I just want to say. First of all, I think the message of necessity that Governor Cuomo said was very important in getting this bill passed. I mean, personally I feel it's nonsense because if it was such a necessity, Connecticut, where this incident actually occurred, they have not acted on this yet. So I mean, look, as horrific as it was, action needs to be taken, but it needs to be done in a very thoughtful way. Again, I hope I don't upset people, but I'm going to say what's on my mind. The Sandy Hook incident, as horrific as it was, should have the blame placed where I truly believe it belongs. And in this case, I hate to say it, but I think it belongs with the mother. I mean, here's a case where she knew her son had a mental illness or mental problems, and she not only taught him how to use a gun, she didn't keep the freaking guns locked up. I mean, come on. You know, my son has had a gun in his hands since he was 4 years old, but they were always kept under lock and key, and I never gave him the key to the safe until he was old enough to be able to handle a gun, and I knew he was capable of doing it. I mean, I think we're losing focus of where the real problem lies. It's not, okay, it was the actual gun that did the killing, but it was the person behind the gun. And I think Mike Harkby had a good point. I mean, if we're going to address this, let's point out things that we truly need to have changed. We'll send that message to Albany and let them know that we're putting a lot of thought behind this process.
Would the board like to do a workshop session and just compare the 2 resolutions and go point by point and find something we can all agree on?
I'm comfortable. I have the bias of having the opportunity to work on the resolution that is before us tonight. I'm comfortable with it as it's written. I'm prepared to vote on that as it exists. It's going to be difficult to ask for the outright repeal. Hardening for school doors, I can't be against that. Given the climate that we face, how can someone argue that a glass door shouldn't be replaced with something that you can't get through easily? metal detectors at schools. We put them in municipal buildings. We have our core protected by metal detector. Unfortunately, we reached a point where we probably have to metal detectors at school. Isolation gates are discussed in the law. If there is a shooter in a school, if you can isolate them to a certain area, it would certainly be much easier for law enforcement to get in there and secure an area. Tougher penalties for victims of police officers and firemen and paramedics who may respond to the scene. I cannot be against that. We're asking these people to risk their lives on our behalf, and law should protect them, and it should treat them specially because they're there for us. Privacy for gun owners. What happened in Westchester by the police, that was unfair. Those people shouldn't be victimized because of their hobby or for their need that they may have for protection. This law addresses that. People can sign up and you can have your pistol permit registry kept private. That's a valuable asset for a gun owner. And I don't see why society needs to do that. If you happen to have a hobby, it doesn't need to be part of the newspaper or subject to some criticism like that. So it's a complex law. To blanketly say, let's repeal the entire thing, I apologize, I can't agree with that. There are components of it that impact Saugerties and our ability to police our community, and there's financial concerns associated with that. I oppose those. Any lawful person who owns a gun, I'm happy for you. I support that right 100%, and use it safely and be a lesson to other people around you. That my experience with people who have these weapons has been all positive. I've had the opportunity to shoot many of them myself. It's fun. I wouldn't deny that. And I don't think that the government should either, but there has to be, not everyone is going to be as responsible as many of you folks are, and our law should reflect that. I think people are here ready to see us vote. I'm prepared to vote.
I would respectfully request that this be tabled and give the public an opportunity to review it and put it on the website.
I'd like an opportunity for a thorough read. I mean, I just got it at 7:40 tonight. Well, I gave you 2 weeks to look at it.
You didn't have a second, or you would have pushed it back.
That's untrue. We actually discussed it in pre-board, and upon request from the board, I gave the board 2 weeks to redo it. I received nothing in writing from the board until 7:40 this evening, and I feel like that I deserve that same courtesy.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Bruce, I
And the
didn't
public
realize.
does too.
Bruce, you're not gonna be here next week, correct?
No, no.
So could we have a special meeting, give the public a week to digest it and get together and vote on it then?
But anyone in the audience that hasn't seen or printed it out, I was not at the last town board meeting. I went home that night because I was ill. I printed it out. It has literally taken me 2 weeks to read this multiple times. And if you want the short version, and I'm assuming there are people here in the audience who have not read the entire document, you can go to the Gun Reform 2013 Initiatives, New York SAFE Act, and it gives you a breakdown by section, but what's more helpful is the questions that are on the website, which is New York SAFE Act FAQ, where you click on the question, and then there's an answer as to how it affects you. I'm prepared to vote on the resolution tonight. I had a lockdown in my building in my school today. It was a drill. You have no idea, since what happened in Sandy Hook, what happened in Connecticut, how that has affected your children. When that incident took place, I was in a middle school computer lab working on a project with my students, and one of my students said, "Mrs. Thornton, come here quick. There's been a shooting in Connecticut." I had 24 kids immediately went to that website, and you have no idea the reaction that those kids had. Since that time, our district has met with our safety committee, as in all districts, I'm sure it's been done all over the country. But to basically take a look at what our policies are and how we can make sure that the kids that we're responsible for are safe. Our students knew that at some point between last week and this week, there was going to be a lockdown. When it came over the PA this morning, my particular class, they knew what they had to do, and they sat there for 25 minutes in total silence. There were no cell phones on. One person had theirs. Turn it off. You're interfering with frequencies. They took it very seriously. They knew it was a drill. At 2:10 this afternoon, another announcement came over the PA. We are in a shelter in place immediately. This was not a drill. And my 9th period class said, Mrs. T, we didn't know we were having this drill. I said, this is not a drill. This is an incident. And it was an emergency situation. The kids knew what to do. They knew what to do because on our morning PA system, on our morning television show, they practiced. They were told, if this is the situation, this is it. The message that I'm hearing from everybody that's sitting out there, many of you, is that this is not a perfect, the SAFE Act is not a perfect act. Should there be funding in here to update school security? Absolutely. Should there be better cameras? Should there be, I'm in a 13-year-old building, we've got glass doors. I can't get in that building unless I use my card. No one can have access to the building, but somebody can stand in front of that building with an assault rifle, whatever that's defined to be, because it changes, and they can have access to that building very easily. I think the message that I'm hearing is that the community, there's parts about this ordinance, the law, that are helpful. My dad was a gun owner, he's a hunter. God, if we didn't have the venison and the turkeys, that was it. I grew up with that. When my father got Alzheimer's disease, the first thing my stepmother said is, I want the guns out of the house. My father actually took one of his guns and went after somebody who was mowing the lawn because he thought he overcharged him. It was not safe to have the weapons in the house. Those weapons were removed for safety reasons. The thing is, a lot of what's in this ordinance is good. It's good for people, it's good for safety. But there's also things that are not good, and I'm not happy with the way it was brought about. But I'm prepared to vote on the resolution, the amended resolution, because it sends the message to Albany that the law needs to be amended, it needs to be changed. If it isn't going to be repealed, then we certainly can push for specific amendments. And I would suggest that this board follow up with a workshop to take the specific things and contact our local Assemblyman Lopez and Senator Kachek and say, look, this is what the town of Saugerties thinks are priorities, and as their legislators, because the change is going to take place in Albany, it's not going to take place here.
Well, Leanne, let me just say this. Why would we not? We accused the governor of passing this thing without giving the people an opportunity to review it. If we just got this afternoon, and I looked at it, I was okay with it. I felt especially good since the chief said he was okay with it. But why would we not give it a week to vote on it? That's what I'm saying.
That's what I think too. I'd like to be able to compare the two versions. I think that's important. And if the board is in favor of making a resolution, please don't interrupt, I'll give you your turn. If the board is in favor of making a resolution to modify it, well then, you and I did read it through. Let's really look at the things we want modified and give them a good list of the things that need to get changed. I'm in favor of that. I think that's a good move. And I also think it gives the public a time to read this through. This basically, the first version, I put it out 2 weeks ago, didn't get a reply, and now I get this back and it's my way or the highway. That's the message I'm getting tonight. You don't want to hear any changes to your secondary proposal, and you want us to, I get it at 7:40, and then you don't want any changes to it.
We
And
routinely
that's not democracy either.
get an agenda late, and then get 2 or 3 revisions after that. And why would we be held to a different standard on this? That is how this board has operated for the past year and a quarter. We get an agenda, we might as well not open that one, because there's gonna be 2 more coming right after it, and more than likely, the day of the meeting, we're gonna change it again. And we don't have pre-boards anymore.
Police department submitted a late agenda item, which was the item
I'm
from
not
the Fish and
objecting
Game
to
Club
that, but I'm
today.
just saying,
So,
you're
no, you gotta
holding-
look at yourself too.
Why didn't you vote on it 2 weeks ago?
Let's just move the subject. Let's stick with the subject. Are we willing to put this off for a week?
I think it needs a week to look at it.
I'm okay with that.
We have a motion on the table.
Why didn't you vote on it 2 weeks ago?
I move to table the motion.
To see it.
Second?
Already.
You gotta,
No, you can't, you have to vote on the motion that's on the floor.
exactly.
I move to table it.
No, you cannot.
You can't move the table a motion that's on the floor. There's a little book. They gotta vote on the old one, and then
Call for a vote.
do a
Or
measure.
rescind the motion. Who made the motion can rescind.
Rescind the motion.
Can't hear you talking. Use a mic.
Rescind the motion.
Lisa said we do, and I believe what she said.
Rescind the motion, Council.
Rescind what motion?
Actually made.
Is there further discussion? No, I oppose voting, because again, this was received late, and there is, no, I just want to make it really clear. This was received at 7:40 tonight, and haven't had the time to even, go through it, digest it, compare it to the other, resolution. This is party politics, this is, It is.
That's
It's gonna run the same way.
If anything, we took the politics out of it. You say the party.
People didn't even need to see it. People didn't even see the resolution. Not fair.
Okay. All right, I'll call for the vote. All right. On the amended resolution concerning the New York Safe Act that Mr. Layton presented. But was there a second on that earlier? Did you have a second? Who was the second? Okay, Frank seconded. All right. Councilman Layton?
Yes.
Councilman Thornton?
Yes.
Councilman Bruno? Councilman Costello?
Yes.
Myself, no. That's because the public has not had a chance to see it.
Ooh, it is wrong. Ooh, you're all fired.
No? Is there a motion to adjourn?
It was wrong. Lady, you're gone.
No, we didn't. We voted on the amendment, now we have to vote on the motion as amended.
I make a motion that we vote on the motion as amended.
A second. You called for the vote on the motion as amended. That passed 3-2. Now we have to vote on the motion as amended by roll call or by whatever you choose. We have to vote on the motion as amended now.
It makes sense to vote twice. All right, so now it's essentially voting on the motion as amended, which means that the changes that were brought forward will be incorporated as the original motion. Okay. Councilman Layton?
Yes.
Councilman Thornton? Yes. Myself, no. Councilman Costello?
Yes.
Councilman Bruno? All right, is there any further business?
I'd like to recommend that we set up a workshop schedule so that we can work on the amendments for what we want to include with the letter that this is going to go with.
It's already done. That opportunity is over. It's done.
No, we can still have a workshop. I know the motion's passed, but we can still have a workshop to draft a letter to go with this amendment.
most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my
I'll put your finger ready, I don't figure out.